So I'm not actually Nathan. We're sitting a little bit out of order, in case you guys were curious. All right. How's everybody doing? Thank y'all so much for coming out to our Buying Confidently in the Mobile Marketing Space panel. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We will have time for Q&A today. So definitely keep track of your questions. You can ask our panelists at the end. All right. So we'll start off with round robins. My name is Katie Matting, and I guess I'm actually kind of a groupie of AppGrow Summit at this point. I was at AppGrow Summit in New York, and now I'm here, so you probably see my face. I am Global Product Director at AGS, so pretty excited to be moderating this panel.
Hey guys, my name is Nathan Dinh. I work at Uber. Uber is a platform that facilitates transactions between riders and drivers. I lead the driver programmatic team, so we work with programmatic partners, direct partners, ad networks, and things like that. So.
Cool. I'm Matt Knutson. I work at Twitter. Probably doesn't need to be described too in depth there. But I am a paid media manager, so I focus primarily on mobile UA through ad networks and programmatic channels, but then also help out with some of the larger brand campaigns as well.
My name is Jayne Pimentel. I'm Senior Director of Growth at DraftKings. DraftKings is a sports tech entertainment platform, who I'm sure all of you have seen an ad on TV before.
Hey everyone, my name is Andrew Tan. I am the co-founder and CEO of FeedMob. For those of you who have not heard of us, FeedMob is a mobile growth platform that transparently aggregates hundreds of networks in order to help our clients grow scalably while also mitigating risks like fraud.
All right, so we have some whales here in terms of big budgets. So that's actually where I want to begin, knowing that we've got Uber, Twitter, DraftKings. How do you guys actually assess what your budgets are going to be? How often are you doing it? How often are you changing? And what are your processes overall for budgeting?
So I'll kick this off. So at the beginning of the year, we go through budget allocations. So we, a lot of times, set up the budget for the year. In terms of allocation, I think it comes down to the campaign that you're running. After 2017, we had a really, really up and down year, as many of you guys know. So we really put the brakes on a lot of the DR campaigns that we've run, and we still do run aggressively, but we scaled back to focus more on brand campaigns. And when I say brand campaigns, it's consideration campaigns, brand sentiment campaigns, understanding why users used Uber, why they left Uber, and things like that, to really measure our brand health. When allocating budget towards our DR campaigns, we use a media mix model. So a media mix model essentially is a move for us away from last click. So what we'll do is ingest all spend and all conversions for a specific market, run thousands of cost curves for each partner. So for example, Media Math, we would run cost curves for Media Math, and every time Media Math was on, we would measure the impact on conversions. So this can be impact to organics, to other channels, and things like that. So this tries to even the playing field between last click, partners who are very click heavy and who can capture that last click, and other partners like Google and things like that who can really hit these users with high intent but not close them out. So the media mix model will essentially reattribute our conversions properly across partners, or we'll attempt to. Yeah.
Would you say it's a little like multi-touch?
Yeah, so it's a step in that direction, but it's we're not there yet. We're not fully there yet. Yeah, so.
Cool, yeah, and for us, it's very similar when we look at just like yearly budgeting, so to speak. So we'll set out and essentially fight for a block of budget that we have for the year and then recalibrate each quarter. So then if we want to just talk about how we allocate quarterly and within the DR channel, which I think is what most of this room is familiar with, is we primarily just let the return on ad spend model dictate where our budgets go for us. So we balance the portfolio as such, and then from time to time we'll carve out budget for testing or allocating to channels we know that may not be as efficient as others, but have a need within our mix total.
And for us, we might be a little bit different. So in the industry that we're in real life events. So things like Le'Veon Bell not starting the first few weeks of the Steelers, right? That impacts us and how we're going to allocate our mix. And just a quick story too. In fact, the first week of NBA, there's a little thing called Mega Millions. Have any of you guys bought a lotto ticket for that?
Everyone in our office
I'm going to
did.
assume
Too
none of
much.
you are mega millionaires if you're in this room right now. But Google Trends, October 19th, had 3x the search volume that the NBA did, and that was week 1 of NBA. Right? We were planning that NBA is going to be a big week, but mega millionaires had that much growth. And then even on top of that, if you looked at any of the market data that came out on app downloads, lottery apps like this, and then the top 3 lottery apps for the first week of NBA on one specific day alone had over 100,000 downloads. So we are heightenedly susceptible to real-life events.
Okay, so as a part of that, I think everyone here knows that self-attributing networks typically comprise a lot of these budgets, right? So when I say self-attributing networks, I'm talking Google, Facebook, those guys. So I know it adjusts for our clients. It is typically 50%, maybe except in the Middle East. So a little bit curious, obviously your answer will be a little different, but if that is the same for y'all, and then also how you guys feel about that power in the ecosystem, and if you think it will be changing, your thoughts there.
I'll lead off just because I have the most interesting and lame answer here, is that because we're Twitter, we've had some competitive separation from the Facebooks and the Snapchats of the world when it comes to allocating budget. Working towards breaking down those barriers, but for now, we're pretty much staying away from that. When it comes to Google, we definitely rely a lot on search, UAC campaigns, things like that. So that's not out of our budget, but yeah, for the Facebooks of the world, not a good answer.
So we use Facebook. It is a large inventory source. They are a partner of ours. You know, no dig to Facebook. They are a walled garden, so they have to protect that, you know, that data asset that they have. But when it comes to learnings, you spend a lot of money, you get your results, but you don't necessarily get the learnings. And I think that, you know, as a mature market now, we're looking for platforms and partners that drive those learnings. So I think there is a move to try to figure out how to kind of de-risk your investment in just Facebook these days.
Yeah, that goes to say for Uber as well. We rely very heavily on Google platform, on Facebook. We haven't actually resolved that issue of the self-attributing platform. What we actively do to measure the impact of their campaigns is run incrementality tests. So they'll push back, but you know, if you push hard enough, they will work with you to build incrementality tests. So essentially what incrementality tests would do is to measure a control and exposed group to measure the impact of your ad and if it's actually driving growth. So.
Incrementality. So I know that everyone in the room, this is kind of a hot topic, right? And even in working actually with one of our clients, Viber, the way that they attacked it was stopping all spend, right? So they completely stopped spending to get their baseline, because without that, you can't really say, I had a proper controlled test. So what are you guys doing beyond Facebook regarding incrementality, and have you actually had any results or any findings from it?
So incrementality, we run incrementality a lot for retargeting. I think some interesting people that aren't on our panel that do incrementality well are Netflix. They actually created a white paper. Their director of economics, kind of well documented, talks about ghost ads. So I think that instead of, you know, reporting incrementality is one thing, but now being proactive and bidding on incrementality is kind of the next foray. And I think that that's kind of what we're pursuing as well when it comes to incrementality.
Yeah, I think for us as a vendor, because we don't have access to all the first-party data, it does make it kind of challenging when clients say, hey, we want to look at incrementality. So what we actually try to derive are what are the other signals that we can pick up on, such as user intent, such as an install decay, which is a mean time to install derivative, right? That we believe is a signal of incrementality, which is really driven by intent. That's the only signal that we have right now. Moving forward, and we believe as the market matures more and more, I think it will be really interesting to see holdout groups, creative testing, as well as complete pauses and things like this. I went to an event specifically about incrementality a few months ago, and there was a learning about eBay doing incrementality testing on search. This was probably in the early 2000s. They completely paused all Google search and saw zero effect on their top line revenue. So I mean, even someone like an eBay came out with that study, and I think, you know, search is something that everyone should buy, and I agree with that, but there's definitely even organic poaching in the search realm because they're forward leaning. They might be even searching for your keywords specifically. So I think it is important, and we'll see that mature more in the next 24 months.
In terms of deployment, so Uber, we rely on our ad servers to deploy incrementality tests. So we leverage DCM to control the holdout for, control and expose, and we'll deploy the campaigns in that way. Before that, we used to do match market, where we'd pick 2 comparable cities. One, we would turn off media, one we would turn on media, and then measure the overall impact. The issue with that was market level noise would cause issues. So, for example, if an Uber driver, got into a big car accident and hit the media, that will negatively impact that test market. So we try and move away from that and towards more of like a controlled platform, such as DCM or Celtra.
Yeah, for us as well, events just make us vulnerable to some of those not great testing environments when it comes to holdout groups by geo. So whether it's an earthquake in San Francisco or Japan, it's tough to look at holdout groups that way. But I think it's also important to define, like when you look at incrementality for retargeting or re-engagement versus incrementality for stealing organic, kind of like Andrew talked about. Because I think there's 2 different ways to approach it, and one you have more control over because you're using data on users that you already know or have, versus just trying to figure out if the money you spend is incremental to what you already have in market.
So regarding incrementality, I know you guys mentioned sometimes you rely maybe on your ad serving partners, maybe you rely on Facebook, maybe it's internal, whatever that may be. It sounds like you guys have a lot of trusted networks, but also potentially new partners that you guys work with and test out. So I want to hear a little bit about, one, how does a partner become a trusted partner? Like, what is that process for y'all? What does it mean? As well as when you're testing out new networks, how often do you do it, and kind of how do you hedge your bets, right? How do you make sure that you're not getting some crappy traffic along the way?
Maybe I'll start. First of all, any kind of growth marketing team that talks about their partner mix being their secret sauce has not future-proofed their growth marketing team. If that's literally all you have, then you have nothing. We look at partners. We run with a few ad networks. We run with a very few amount of partners for a reason, and that's because we want to give them more data. So we tighten the screws on some partners, and then we take out the drill and we tighten that even more, because it's really not about spray and pray at this point. You learn nothing. It's about the data points you can provide back to trusted partners to make them perform. You'll never get it on the first try. You'll probably never get it on the second try, and then, hopefully hell or high water, you're going to get it on the 3rd try.
I think it's really understanding their unique selling point. At the end of the day, everyone's going to come to you and say like, hey, we have the best tech, we have the best fraud. So it's really just getting into the weeds of where they're buying. Uber used to test partners almost like on a monthly basis, but now we've really trimmed our media mix to maybe about 5 partners or less. And we've really trimmed it in a way where we would ask partners, be like, hey, where are you buying our inventory? What exchanges would you actually be buying from? And what we would actually do is, with our close relationship with the exchanges, is try and audit if they were actually buying on our behalf. And this is obviously with their consent. And we'd be like, hey, can you guys let us talk to MoPub and really ask, did you buy my Talking Tom, 7 million clicks in the last week? Like, can we verify this? And be like, oh, no, we're buying it through an API or things like that. Can you verify if they're being, sketchy about it? Those are things that you should ask. And another thing is using your own ad server. If the partner doesn't allow you to, serve through with ad server tags, that's going to be an issue, because if they're buying on all the major exchanges, IAB compliant ads, like, they should be able to take it, unless they have like a DCO product where they're like manipulating the creatives and messaging and things like that. But you really have to vet them out for their unique selling points.
Yeah, and just hammering home the unique selling point. It's really just trying to find what's unique and what's different about, let's just say, in the ad network space, that particular ad network. Because, the more sophisticated the industry gets, the more convoluted the differences between each network becomes. So really drilling into like what's that one unique thing or set of features that you have that nobody else in this space has right now, or are you willing to build those things for me?
Yeah, and I think over here at FeedMob, I think we have an interesting perspective on this, because on one side, we're a vendor as well, right? And trusted is like a big word that we personally harp on a lot in our culture. Like, we want to focus on being the trusted or one of the trusted partners for anyone that we're servicing. And I think that the industry is kind of waking up and saying, hey, trust is not a commodity yet, right? It's very hard to come by. Now, with us, as we aggregate hundreds of networks, the question coming back to us is, do we have our trusted networks as well, right? Yes and no. I would say we have our go-to networks that we've worked with for months or years, that we know that we have a good relationship, and we do have an understanding of how they culturally think about approaching running campaigns and make goods and things like this. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to what the client need is. Every client, no matter if it's male RPG to male RPG, the strategy coming from the top down can be very different. So depending on what those stringent asks are, we will pare down the media mix for that. Another question you had was asking about testing networks. I think it's actually our responsibility as a consolidated partner to be always testing for our clients, actually. So we bring on about 10 to 15 networks every single month to make sure that we have enough coverage in the mobile supply landscape, which is constantly changing. And that is part of the value as well.
It's a lot of new networks. Do you guys assess daily? Is it like a 24-hour?
It's rolling. So, I mean, we already have over 250 networks that we're integrated with. And then we bring them on, and depending on what we see within the first, we try to analyze in the first 12 to 24 hours as fast as possible. If someone really just went out the gate and just clicked, spam, dumped on us, then, you know, we see that as a sign very quickly. But at the same time, I think it's important to let data mature out and see how they adapt, because I don't think it's not necessarily fair for us to go and say, like, hey, that's one shot, like, that was it. We want to develop partnerships, and that's how we derive value for our clients, is we want to find new pockets of the inventory. So we'll try to help guide them and see how they react, and then see what happens from there.
So is this subset not specifically new channels, but actually new types of creative, right? So vertical videos and all the fun stuff. I know I was just on a call with Snapchat where they're going to have these AI-based lenses and all this kind of fun stuff. Obviously, they sound great. They sound like this is the next big thing that's going to happen in mobile advertising. But when it comes down to it, you have to spend a lot more to make those types of creatives. So typically, are you guys one of those where you wait to see what are the engagement rates after something's released? Or do you always kind of want to be a part of the beta test to try out some of those new creative formats?
For Uber, we definitely want to be in the beta. So we want to be where our users are going to be. So leveraging the Snapchats, the Facebooks, or Google for their reach, and the Snapchats, we definitely want to be testing it. In terms of creative, I think nowadays as we progress forward, everything's about personalization. And so we are really investing heavily into DCO, which is dynamic creative optimization. So what we would do is use first-party audience data to curate the message, the creative, and the asset towards that particular user. So whether it's a female in San Francisco that has a high affinity to drive, we'll adjust the amount of money that we would offer and the amount of rides that she's required to take. So really using your first-party data to be smart with your creatives is something that I think is extremely important.
Yeah, and just dovetailing off of that, very, very similar story for us as well. We want to be, well, we are a real-time platform, and we need that to be our selling point. So in order to do that, in our creatives, we need to show what's happening right now, what are the stories going on right now, what are the trending hashtags, and we need to be able to present that to users in an instant way.
Sure, I'll go again. For creative, kind of echo, I think it's the next kind of lever that a lot of people or a lot of advertisers have maybe ignored. For us, it's kind of going back to foundational around how are we even tagging creatives, breaking a creative apart, and really like creating these IDs, these like mini IDs within a creative ID, because for us, we're a multi-product company. So we could serve 10 different sports to a single user with 15 different contest types and a completely different offer, and we need to know really what drove them to our app or our site to convert.
So then as a subset of that, tying in networks as well as creative, let's say you have certain campaign baselines you want to hit. The campaign is not hitting that. Have you guys ever had a situation where it was actually the creative itself that wasn't working versus the quality of the traffic? Don't.
I think, again, it goes back to like how are you measuring creative? Because I think 9 times out of 10, if a creative's not working, you'll just cut the partner. And really, it probably was a creative. It probably was a really shitty creative, or a really bad playable. A former company, one of our playables took us 3 years to optimize. We had it running for 3 years, the same playable, but it worked. But it took us 3 years to optimize that creative.
I mean, at Uber, I don't think we'll cut a partner necessarily for creative performance, but before we launch a new lineup of creative assets, we definitely go through rigorous testing, and we wouldn't necessarily hold those performance goals against that particular partner at that time, if that makes any sense.
It does. I've just always found it funny, right? Because we're tracking all these campaigns, we can see the name, but we don't ever know what the creative actually is. So sometimes it's kind of funny because I've been advertised myself where I'm like, I'm a quality user, but I am not clicking on that ad. So just.
Yeah, and I think for us, for creatives, you know, we do buy on the affiliate space, and it's hard to get perfectly accurate data when you're doing that. That's just the reality of the world that drives a lot of efficiency in this space. So what we always recommend for clients is really get your creative vetting through maybe an RTB channel or Facebook, understand what your audience likes and doesn't like, and then when you're ready, use those best practices to leverage a channel like ours on the display side where there's not always that full tagging that is even able to be implemented, whether you would want it to be or not. If you want to buy on that channel, you really should leverage, in our opinion, the creative learnings from the other channels and do that first.
All right, so here's the fun one, and I know you guys will have varying answers, so I won't hate on you if you don't answer exactly what I was going for. But what is one thing that you would tell everyone in this room that they need to track 100% from a data perspective?
I think looking at an ad as a beacon of data, there's a reason that Facebook is the best performance partner that you probably have, and that's not because of their owned and operated data. It's actually because of the data that they get from their pixels and their SDKs that's in all of our apps. We can, you know, as a marketer, we can get a lot of that data from the impressions that we're serving. So turning it around and thinking, where are my users outside of my app, and how can I use that to my advantage in targeting and optimization and creative. I think being able to do that will put you at a way higher level than where we are today.
I have two answers to this, a boring one and a more cool one. So the boring one is obviously track post-install events, right? But that's very obvious. But I think understanding what event down the funnel is an indicator of a high-value user. So just tracking, you know, day 7, day 30, day 14, but understanding is day 7 actually a good indicator? So for Uber, it's the amount of trips, the amount of rides a person will take that shows that they actually understand the product and continue to use it. So post-install events, yes, but understanding which one is a high indicator so you can optimize towards that one versus kind of muddying up the water with like 10 events. The second one would be impressions. I think understanding the touch points, so this is back to your MTA question. So measuring impressions through something like an ad server, you can start to measure the path to conversion. So did they see a Facebook ad, a Google ad, a YouTube video, and then searched, right? At the end of the day, right now, we're only getting the attribution to search. But there were so many channels that were a part of that path, that journey, that you can start to map. So starting to understand to measure impressions and track impressions is actually probably the next step in terms of attribution.
All right, so you went up top of the funnel. I'm going to go way down at the bottom of the funnel, and I would say LTV. I'm a big proponent of return on ad spend. The only way to get that is to get LTV, and so that just allows your business to be really flexible in the goals of that current time. You don't have to be static, whether that be you want to go heavy revenue or you want to go heavy user, low quality, so to speak. So that's where I would go, LTV.
So I kind of have two as well. One will be kind of a bonus. But so the first one in regards to data is looking at the user journey, which I think, you know, everyone is talking about, post-install data, et cetera. What I really mean by that and what we've seen as of late, and as of late is literally last 3-6 months, is much more sophisticated bot fraud that target what we call famous KPIs. So understanding the sequentiality on the vendor side of what is normal user behavior can help protect you guys when you guys are running marketing campaigns. Because there's things even like SDK spoofing. It's not even a bot farm. It's literally a server firing off a call to the MMP and saying like, this is a day 7 retained user. Or this is a purchase event, and it doesn't even exist at all. So really understanding the user journey, plotting that out, understanding the sequentiality of those events is what we're modeling and beginning to build in our analytics tool here at FeedMob now. And I think that's a big thing that's kind of new for all of us. It used to be 2 post-install events, focus on this one, because that one's great. And now we've gotten to a market maturity level where a lot of fraudsters know what that is for your campaign, and that makes it more difficult to play safe. And here's the bonus one. The bonus one, it also in regards to fraud, is the Google Play timestamp, which is pretty new, but it's actually really powerful. So what that is it's the actual timestamp when the install happens. It's only on Android, it's Google Play. And what that helps protect against is click injection or install hijacking, where a malware app will have that deal, and they'll say, okay, that user installed that app. They fire the click before the first spool up, before that first MMP SDK gets fired off. So if you have that Google Play timestamp, you should definitely ask your MMP if they can collect that. You can be much safer about click injection on the Android side of things.
All right, so I'm gonna have one last question before we open it up for Q&A, and still on the data pipeline, but one of my favorite quotes is that if you torture the data enough, it will confess to anything. And I think many of us here in the room have massaged the data maybe in a way that it turned out to be pretty insightful, right? Maybe without the statistical significance that we needed. What is one of the biggest mistakes y'all have made with data?
For me, it just goes back to exactly what you just explained there, where it's like you have a hypothesis and your initial learnings start to lead you down the road of the conclusion of that hypothesis that you want. And so you just drill into that and let the data tell you what you want to hear versus what you need to open it up and gain statistical significance so that you have a clear answer. So
Mine would be not using your gut enough when you're looking at the data, and I think that's probably parlays on a few of those things. There's an example of an interview with the CEO of Groupon who talked about how he was shown data that said that they should send users 15 emails per day, that it would grow revenue, which is true in probably the first 2 days. But then, right, churn rate goes like that. So, basically, the net of that is like, I basically said at the end of the day, I don't care what that data says because I know that in my gut, that's not true.
Yeah, and going off Matt's point about kind of like having the data, like you have this hypothesis you want it to be true. I think one of the mistakes we made early on is not having enough deterministic data and looking at data in silos, especially as it comes to fraud. There's certain things that you can look at when it comes to fraud that are very telling, and there's other things that are signals that you need to ingest in combination with other signals to actually get more deterministic data. And let me be a little bit more specific. So IPs are something that a lot of people look at. There are real legitimate reasons why people may be using a server-side click. And that will look like a repeated IP or even a sequential IP. Now, that on its own, in the early days, we would say, no, this is like definitely cut that off, and then we cut that spend, and then, okay, great. And then as we started doing more work in video and reward video, there's actually certain networks out there that do that on purpose, and it's completely legitimate, right? So you have to understand, is it nefarious, right? Where is it coming from? What's the motivation behind the vendor or the fraudster or the network, et cetera? So the big mistake is, I think, being overly sensitive about fraud just based on a hypothesis can get you a lot of false positives, and that will restrict potentially good spend at the end of the day.
And I guess our issue was not leveraging data early enough. Everybody, knows that Uber sits on a wealth of data. Up until maybe the last year and a half, we started to activate on first-party data. So we would rely heavily on partner conversion data to help us optimize. So we've really moved away from that. And then also going back to Andrew's point is looking into the data for different nuggets of fraud and figuring out what types of fraud that you can find from the data. So.
All right, so we will now open it up to Q&A. I don't know if someone's walking around with a mic, but let us know what questions you guys have. Oh, yep. Where are you? It's very dark. All right, so if there's no questions, then we will do a closing tips and tricks. So whatever you guys can kind of leave them with, that's the one thing you want them to walk away with today.
I think leverage paid media to grow your growth machine, but that can't be your only strategy. Understand your product's unique selling points, the viral loops that you guys can use. So for Uber, we use budget to drive in users, and when they're in, they can actually send referrals. So we have a very powerful give-get powerful referral system that multiplies the user base. Think Dropbox, inviting people to collaborate with your folder. Think Slack, building a team like that. So if your competitive advantage is just pure media spend, what's stopping your competitor to come in and really just kick you off your, what you're doing. So build unique viral loops that, are hard to compete, hard to replicate.
For me, I would just say be rigorous. Always ask questions. If it looks really good, ask why. If it looks really bad, ask why. And just continually keep digging in, digging in, digging in.
I'm going to echo both of you. Yeah, be gritty. Call out the bullshit when you see it. And everyone's doing a great job. So be supportive of everyone, too. It's a hard industry to be in.
Yeah, pretty much just echoing what they say. It's really understanding your supply chain as much as possible. Sometimes it's not possible. People don't always know what the end media buyer might be buying, but really trying at least to understand that from your partners, I think is really powerful, because those insights, for instance, are you buying pop or lander in mobile web, and does that work for your specific sector, can become an unfair competitive advantage when you're out there spending against other people who have millions as well.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming today, and thank you to our amazing panelists.
Thank you.